Now we are going to move to disruption and investing in the theme of disruption, which inevitably involves the very interesting and always topical technology companies. Another special guest today, Alex Pollak, CIO of Loftus Peak, joins me live now in the studio. Alex, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Danielle.
Okay, so let's just cut to the chase. What is a disruption fund?
Well, it's a fund that seeks to invest in the change that's taking place across every industry. So, free-to-air television now, it's streamed, right? Retail, some of it's still in Woolworths, but a chunk of it comes in online. Anything to do with travel is pretty much all online nowadays. Thinking about agriculture, unless you know the granular state of every single of the 3 million seeds you might plant, which you can only do with technology, you can't maximise yields and maximise your own performance or profitability as an agricultural concern. So disruption is, it started in the world of newspapers and television, so to speak, 25 years ago, and it's worked its way through there into banking, into retail, and now it's in cars and into the power grid, etc. So every aspect of global business is being disrupted, and it's being disrupted as a result of the rise of the semiconductor. And I guess people have this idea that semiconductors are all about smartphones and computers, laptops, but that's just a tiny part of it, right? What's really going on is that the whole global economy is increasingly running on semiconductors. And that's where the disruption takes place, because everyone's got to operate through a different model. Okay,
well, let's jump in there on semiconductors, because of course NVDA has been one of the top performers over in America. I think you own it, and you've had some fantastic performance. And of course, this is all about artificial intelligence and that whole thematic. So let's take as much as we can, given that this subject is ginormous in its extent, a quick dive into how is AI, generative AI, how is it disrupting, and which parts of the chain would you invest in, i.e. you've got the supply chain, you go everything back to the company that produces the foundries, to the foundries that produces to the chips that are designed, etc.
So we've got some pretty defined views on what AI will do, obviously. And, what it will do is it will make your work easier and quicker to do. You might be in a Microsoft application, you might be writing a PowerPoint presentation, you might want that PowerPoint presentation rendered across to Word in one go, and somebody might walk into you and say, and by the way, I want you tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock in Melbourne to do a presentation, and all this stuff has to be wrapped up, etc. And you can just ask your co-pilot to wrap the presentation and the Word document up and book you a flight, etc., etc. But that's all yet to happen, right? That's like, it's not quite there yet. And we're going to have to see the return on investment that companies get from rolling that out. So that's a little bit cart before the horse. The horse, in this case, is the chips themselves, is the hardware behind how machine learning runs. And obviously NVIDIA is the obvious way to play it. And there's sound reasons for that, because it's a massive, it has the capacity to process very, very much faster, because it parallel processes. I mean, very simply, generally speaking, everything goes through a single port, so to speak. NVIDIA parallel processes, so it goes through tens of thousands of different ports. And although each one processes only a tiny amount of information, they do it all together at the same time. So, so it's the chips that, in the first instance, no company that is looking at what they're going to do in the next 12 months is not going to buy more AI capacity and chips, because they're all going to be saying, all my competitors are doing this. So in the first instance, companies across the world are going to be buying the capacity, so the chips and the networking and the data center providers, they are going to be buying that capacity to be able to roll out competitive offerings against other companies that are doing the same thing. That's the horse. That's what's happening right now. Then, going back to where we started with the cart, then in the end of 18 months, they might say, actually, it hasn't worked. So we bought too much AI equipment, and now it doesn't work as well as we thought it was going to work. Or they might say in 18 months' time, actually, this is working way better than we thought. We'll have to buy more. So that we are in that point right now. The point is, right now, they're going to be buying heaps. In 6 to 12 months, they're going to have an idea of how much of it's working, and they will adjust their pace.
Which, two questions spring to mind. The competitive advantage in terms of the GPUs that NVIDIA is producing, how much of an advantage do they have? And then, sorry, but there's another aspect to it. I loved that thing about where we don't know where it's going to be in 6 to 12 months' time. And that would lead me to the second part of the question, which is the pull-through of earnings that the market is potentially doing for a stock like NVIDIA, where some people might be saying bubble. So sorry, I've kind of popped two huge questions into one. Well,
the demand for GPUs at NVIDIA, that is real. That is absolutely real. And there are other GPU manufacturers out there, for example, like AMD. But what NVIDIA has is the software and the developers that are familiar with the NVIDIA GPUs already at industry grade rolling out levels to be able to go and create those products on the Amazon AWS cloud or the Microsoft Azure cloud. So they've got a tremendous competitive advantage right now because they've got the hardware and the software, and having the software guys to understand this thing that NVIDIA has called CUDA, and then how to operate all the libraries, the image libraries, the text libraries, the 3D libraries, the music libraries. That is a significant thing in its own right. And NVIDIA has all those things right now. And so absolutely, you're not going to get, I don't think, NVIDIA may run on and ultimately be too expensive, but there's more coming in this company in the next 12 months. The second part of your question was?
Well, I guess it was the competitive advantage. I think you've answered both of the questions, because you've also said that you've inferred, if I've understood you correctly, that the demand is there. There's potentially a lot more to come. So the people calling NVIDIA just a big bubble could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bubble. It's real. The question is, when they get their answers in terms of how much extra business it generated, to go back to the cart question, which will be in 12 to 18 months' time, then they will say, we bought too many NVIDIA chips or not enough. We don't have those answers yet.
Yeah.
Nobody does. Nobody has those answers right now. That is a live question that is being debated across the world right now by small and large companies.
Does an investor like yourselves, do you have to necessarily go offshore to find the optimal disruption ideas that are being successfully monetised?
Look, you can be lucky enough to find some in Australia, but we operate, many of them would be small cap companies, and we're not a small cap fund. And so small cap funds have other constraints around how much they can invest and what size positions they could have and the size of companies that they invest in. We are not a small cap fund, we're a large capitalisation fund. And so because we're a large capitalisation fund, our hunting ground is more fertile globally.
Indeed. Can I ask about Tesla?
Sure.
Okay, so Tesla is, by many of the people that support it, one of the most ultimate disruptive companies. It's not just solely a manufacturing company, it's got potentially all the ancillary parts to it. How do you view Tesla?
We've owned Tesla, and we owned it way back. We owned it when they were just approaching from the other side the ability to produce 1 million cars. And someone once asked me, are you ready for Tesla to be stock price, whatever it was, $500, $1,000 or something like that before it did the split? And my response was, actually, that's the wrong question. The correct question is, are you ready for Tesla to produce $60 billion worth of annual revenue from the first million cars? Turned out the market wasn't ready for that, because when they did that, the stock price went very high. And we owned it all through that period, and we did very well out of it. We don't own it now. We don't own it now because while Tesla make great cars, they're not the only company that's making great electric cars. The Chinese, on a daily basis, are producing very high quality electric cars as well as hybrids. And there are more cars being exported. The Europeans have just actually jacked up about the fact, and they want to impose import tariffs on Chinese cars because Chinese EVs are outselling German EVs in the European market. So the answer to the question is there's plenty of competition coming at Tesla. And so for us, even with the charging station monopoly or oligopoly that they're building up, even with what they're doing in terms of AI, etc., it still doesn't stack up as an investment for us anymore. So we're not in there anymore.